welcome to our first Fertility Circle Live event. We're very excited today to be chatting to nutritional therapist Alison Hall. And as it's Pregnancy and Baby Loss Awareness Week, we thought it would be a good idea to chat about pregnancy loss, particularly recurrent loss. And Alison's going to perhaps talk about some ways that you can use nutrition and lifestyle to help improve your chances of a successful pregnancy. So yes, thank you, Alison.
Oh, you're welcome. You're really welcome. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. And it's really good to talk about this stuff because I think people really need to know where they can help themselves and where they need to go to turn to get help as well. So it's vital.
Yeah. So where do you start with people when they come to you and they've perhaps experienced multiple losses?
Okay. So what I try and do is I really like it when I can work with couples. And generally I will see both members of a couple, because as we know, it takes two. So, we've got 50% DNA from the woman and 50% from the man. So it's really important that actually, if we can, we're addressing both members of the couple as much as we can. And the way I work is I work within what's called a functional medicine framework. So what we do is we look at the body as a series of interconnected systems. So by that, I mean, we know, for example, that what happens in one area of the body is going to have an effect on another area. So what happens in the gut, for example, is going to have a direct impact on our estrogen and progesterone balance, is one example. And we know that stress can affect everything, absolutely everything. So, it can throw our digestion out, it can throw our hormones out, both our sex hormones and our other hormones. It can cause inflammation. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It can affect our sleep. So we want to look at everything. So when I first meet a couple, I will always send them quite an in-depth questionnaire to begin with. And in that questionnaire, what we're looking at is I want to get information about family history, medical history, so what might have happened in your childhood, any particular illnesses or conditions that you may have had that may be impacting your health overall. We'll be looking at any medications you're on. We'll be looking at symptoms that you currently have, your nutrition, obviously, so what you're eating, with no judgment, I might add, no judgment at all, because we all have good days, we all have bad days, it's all over the place. We look at stress, we look at sleep, we look at exercise. So we try and build a really, really comprehensive picture of what's going on with the individual, and we'll do that for both parties. And then what we're trying to do is we're looking at ways to reduce risk. So we're looking at those areas that may need more supportive measures. And sometimes that will be done in conjunction with your doctor or with your consultant. Sometimes we can work on those things separately as well. So we're looking at those areas and we're seeing what we can do to, people say to bring the body into balance, and actually, that's what the body wants to do, but we need to give it a helping hand. And if there are issues that are going on, if there are things, for example, if you've had digestive issues, gut issues for years and years and years, if you are really symptomatic with PCOS, for example, we want to support those things, ideally before you conceive or before you try to conceive. Because then if we can level that playing field, we are getting your body in the best possible shape to hopefully improve those chances of a successful pregnancy. So that's what we're looking at.
Sometimes people don't realise, they're not aware of these things. You just it becomes normal. So you do have some gut issues, or you do have other issues going on, but you're not fully aware of them. And then when you stop and think, you realise, actually, hang on, maybe there are some things we need to work on.
Absolutely. And it's really surprising how often they can impact things. So, for example, I had a client a while ago, and she came to me and she was just on the floor. She was so exhausted, but she didn't know what was going on. And she'd been like that for quite some time. And she assumed that it was just down to the stress of her job. And stress was a huge, huge factor here. But what she didn't realize was actually that her thyroid was really, really out of whack, and it was really, really struggling. And that was also having a knock-on effect on her digestive system. And that was also having a knock-on effect on why her periods were up the spout. So, what we could do is, and actually we had a lovely, we had about 5 months to work together, which was really nice. And what we were able to do is really look at supporting those stress levels. and really working on her digestive system as well.
Yeah.
And it made a huge difference. And having previously suffered 3 miscarriages, she went on to have a lovely, healthy baby boy, and had a really, really healthy pregnancy where she felt great throughout it. And, when you get messages like, oh my goodness, I was dancing around the kitchen last night, and, a month ago, I wouldn't have been able to walk down to the shops.
Wow.
Then you know that it's making a difference. And that's
Incredible.
really, really lovely.
Yeah. And do you think there's a sort of certain time people need to prepare in advance of trying to conceive?
Yes, I really do.
How long
So
do you need? Or I guess it varies for each person.
It does vary for each person. And if you've had symptoms all of your life, then obviously it's going to take a little bit longer. There's no magic wand. There just isn't, unfortunately. But I really like to have 3 months. So what we know is that it takes 3 months to produce a batch of sperm. We know that. We know that it takes 3 months to mature an egg. So although we're born with all our eggs, and in fact, even when we were being carried in utero by our mums, we had, by the end of that first trimester, all of our eggs were fully formed, which is just kind of, it always blows my mind.
Incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it? But then they go into this sort of suspended state of hibernation, and that lasts for quite some time until we hit puberty. And then actually the really critical window is, approximately 3 to 4 months prior to ovulation. And that's when those eggs are going to be matured. So, it's no coincidence that sperm and egg take approximately the same amount of time, to get themselves together. And that's the amount of time I really, really like to have, if possible. So then what you know is that what you're doing now is going to have a material difference 3 months down the line. So again, it's not going to happen immediately, but that's the sort of window that we want to work with. And also that gives us an opportunity to actually make some changes, because I don't know about you, but if I'm told I've got to, I don't know, cut out a particular food, or I need to eat more of, more broccoli, say, for example, or I need to get more vegetables on my plate, I might do it once or twice, but actually I need to embed those habits. And that's really, really important. And so if we don't have that opportunity, we can't do that. So, it takes time. It really does.
And I suppose 3 months is quite a good amount of time, isn't it, for you to make those changes and just, like you say, to kind of get your head around everything you've got to do. And I think in that time, I guess in 3 months, you can make quite a big difference to the quality of egg and sperm.
You can. I normally work with people over that period of time, and I tend to work with them ideally for about 5 sessions. So, we'll have a session, we'll discuss various issues, the couple will go away and work on that, and I'll be always there to sort of, if they need me, they can contact me during that period of time. And there are bumps in the road, there are always bumps in the road, so I'm there to help them work through that as well. And then we'll come back and we'll build on it week or session by session, and again, so start with the basics and then gradually build up, because the last thing you want to do is overwhelm. And it's stressful.
Yeah,
it's really stressful when you're on that fertility journey.
By thinking, oh my goodness, I had a glass of wine, or oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done it, and then the guilt of those things can actually cause you more stress.
Much more stress, and that's the last thing you want. And you've got enough stress going on already. You're already thinking, what the hell's happening to my body? Why is my body letting me down? Why am I hearing about this announcement over here, and why am I hearing about that over there? And now I'm 36 and 37 and 38, and it can be horrible. So we need to take a step back. And also the other side of that, I think that's really important, is if you see both members of a couple, you're in it together, because it's a team game. And I think too often the responsibility falls on the shoulders of the woman. We tend to be the ones who do all the reading. I know I was when it was my, and it was me who was telling my husband, can we eat this? Or, what about this? Or, I've read something or another. And, it's too much. Again, that's more stress in a relationship. And I'd far rather take on that responsibility for a couple. So if I can be, I'm not playing bad cop, but if I'm the person who's guiding, if you like, and take that away from the dynamics of that relationship, so that you can begin to remember what you were like before this journey started.
Which is hard sometimes.
It's flipping impossible sometimes. It's so difficult. But so everything we can do to alleviate that and help remove those pressures.
It's also really important to have that support from someone else, because sometimes, like for me, if I know in my head what I need to do, but actually carrying and following those things through can be hard. And sort of maintaining that over a long period of time, it can be hard. Whereas if you have someone else to support you and encourage you, or to say, it's okay if you had that, but maybe next week try to get back on track. And I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's vital. It really, really is, because it does take time. It really does.
And is there any specific things that you suggest to the male partner to look at in terms of helping to prevent recurrent miscarriage?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big one. So again, we've just talked about the fact that it's 50-50, and it really is a team game, which is what I tell all the couples. So we know that sperm counts have dropped dramatically over the last 50 years or so. And although we don't know, there's not one causal reason for it, but we know that there are lots of contributory factors. So, smoking, stress, being overweight, alcohol, drug use, recreational drug use, marijuana, for example, is terrible for sperm. Toxins environmental toxins that we're exposed to, and we can't live in a bubble. There's nothing we can do about that. But we know that our sperm are sensitive little things. They really are sensitive to all of these environmental exposures that we have. And it's really, really causing a problem. And so what we want to do is, first of all, we want to rule things out if we possibly can. And again, this comes back to this idea of trying to reduce risk. So if we can identify what might be going on through that extensive questioning to begin with, and testing where necessary. So we can test semen analysis. We can recommend DNA sperm fragmentation.
And we at that one as well, isn't it?
It's really important, because
what people are offered a standard test, but don't know that there may be other things going on.
Absolutely. And what's important to remember is these tests are only useful if we can action the results. So there's no point having a test if it's just showing you something and there's nothing you can do about it. But these tests, we know that we can make a difference with. And actually, we can use that to quantify how we're doing as well. So, we can, under some circumstances, test to begin with and test again later. We may not need to if we're listening to our symptoms and our body. So we can do semen analysis, we can do sperm fragmentation. And then in terms of the things that a couple can do and a man can do, we know that the Mediterranean diet has really, really good evidence in terms of supporting sperm quality. So we're talking about, lots of colourful veg on the plate. We're talking about good quality protein with every single meal. We're talking about healthy fats as well. Those are the three really, really key ones. And then swapping out all the sugars and, any of the sort of the white fluffy carbs, as we call them, and replacing them with brown, more complex carbohydrates. So all of those things are going to make a big difference. And particularly with the vegetables, they're going to be giving us a whole heap of phytonutrients or plant chemicals. And they're giving us loads and loads of antioxidants. And different foods or different plants have different properties. So they're working in union together, if you like. So diversity is really, really important. And then there are the environmental things that we can also do. So yes, we really want to cut down on alcohol. We want to stop smoking if we possibly can. I mean, that's just a given. But then there are all sorts of other things we can do. So we know that heat affects sperm production and sperm quality. So boxers rather than briefs, for example. And in fact, there was one study that it was about 2018, I think, where there was a 25% higher sperm concentration in the men who were wearing boxers over briefs.
Wow,
that's huge. Yes. It's huge. So it's a really great opportunity to go out and buy new underwear. Keeping cool. So be careful if you're cycling everywhere. Just think about that region. Laptops, don't have your laptop on your lap. Try to avoid saunas, really hot baths, heated seat warmers in cars.
Yes, oh my goodness.
Turn them off. We don't need them. And environmental toxins. So, the exposure that we have. So again, particularly if you're running, if your morning commute is a jog along really, really busy urban streets, just think about, your aerobic capacity is increasing. So you're breathing in at a sort of deeper level, all these toxins, similarly with cycling as well. So is that actually going to be the best thing for you? Whereas if you're having a lovely walk in in a park, or, exactly, fresh air, then that's that's fantastic. So again, really thinking about this. And again, then you can think about, your plastic exposure. You can think about what you're cleaning with. You can think about what you're cooking with, trying to use have water bottles that have stainless steel or glass, for example. So there are all these things, but what I do say to couples is it can be really overwhelming. So try and think of one thing. Exactly. So it's thinking about one thing at a time. So again, it goes back to that staged approach. So, get a few basics in place. If you can subscribe to an organic veg box, that's fantastic, because again, you're immediately reducing that toxic load a little bit by taking some food that's going to be organic. So it's little things. And if you think about it, every single step you take is a step in the right direction. And that's one of the things that I really love about nutritional therapy. And one of the reasons that I got into it in the first place, which was when I was struggling to have a baby, I felt out of control.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand why my body wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, after being told for blimmin' years that, I just needed to look at a boy. And, I wanted to do something, and I'm type A enough to know that, if I didn't do something, it was going to drive me mad. And so the more I read, the more I realized, and it made sense that what I put into my mouth is going to have a direct impact on the way my body is functioning. So with every meal, you can make a difference.
And everything that you're mentioning there, all of these things people can do at home. A lot of things are quite simple little changes. Just have some more veg. Just look at small things you can change.
Absolutely. And I think that's what you've got to do. It's the small things, and loads of little small things are going to, together they're going to make a big difference, and they can be a real game changer.
So it's just about having awareness of these things, isn't it? A lot of people may not know what things will make a difference. So if they can speak to someone like yourself that can help them with those things, then that can really help.
And I think the important thing to remember there is, if you're speaking to anyone, like me, any, nutritional therapist, it's tailored, individualized care. So again, it goes back to looking at your medical history, your family history, your symptoms, what you're doing with your life, where you currently shop, what sort of job you do. Are you a frequent flyer? Not at the moment, obviously, but have you got a history of flying a couple of times a month? That's going to have an effect. It's all those things, and that way we can really tailor a program to you, rather than there are loads of books out there, there are loads of blogs out there. It's we've got information overload, and that's wonderful, but actually it's not all going to be relevant. I sometimes have
information and knowing how it works for you and what you can then do.
I mean, an example of that is I sometimes have clients come to me and they are rattling with supplements because they've read about, this magic cure, and they've read about that, and, all these things. And actually they're spending a fortune on potentially supplements that may not be in the right form for them. But also a lot of them that aren't relevant to them. And what a waste of money, and how stressful, again, to have sort of millions and millions of little bottles lined up. You don't need any more of that.
I've done that. I did exactly that. I would Google what's good for air quality, took everything I could. I didn't know how much I should be taking. I didn't know if I needed to take it. I had no idea. So actually, it's one thing I wanted to ask you. So can you then advise people what supplements would be right for them, and how would you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's taking that really, really detailed history and deciding what are the areas that we really want to focus on. And so for every single client, it will be slightly different. And then what we do is we tailor our supplement protocol, if you like, for that person. And very often it's also a negotiation. So it might be that it's all very well me saying you need to have X, Y, and Z, but if you're a person who's not very good at taking supplements or forgets to take supplements, or, you know, you've got them all there, but, you know, you're not taking them regularly, that's no good either. So again, we need to really work with what form is going to be best. So for example, I quite often recommend omega-3 oils because we know that they're anti-inflammatory, they're really great for cellular health. But actually, if you're someone who the mere thought of taking fish oils just makes you want to be sick,
Yeah.
I'm going to think around that and give you another solution that's going to be better suited to you. Yeah. So that's really, really, really crucial. And that's very much the case. I know you had a question about MTHFR, for example.
Yeah, someone's had that immune testing done and find out they have that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is a very good example actually of this. So if we're talking about MTHFR, it's a variation on a gene, number one. And what most women know that we need to take folate, which is vitamin B9, for fertility, and we know that it reduces the risks of, for example, spina bifida, cleft palate, tongue tie, and we need to really be taking it for about 12 weeks, ideally before conception. So that's what we know. Okay, but the thing is, there are different types of folate. So this is where, you know, the different supplements come into it. And these different types of folate, some of them are going to be better suited depending on your genes and your genetic makeup. So for example, folic acid is the synthetic form of folate. And that's great. And we know that it has got some, you know, it's been used, and since it's been used, we know that it's really improved pregnancy outcomes, which is fantastic. However, we also know that approximately somewhere between 40 and 60% of the population have a gene mutation which make it more difficult to convert folic acid, which is the synthetic form, into folate. And if you have that, then what can happen is the unconverted folic acid, it creates a blockage, if you like. So you'll have lots and lots of folic acid and folate in your blood, but it's not actually getting into the cells where it's needed to do its job. And that can be a real problem. So MTHFR, it's a genetic variation. It's not a diagnosis. And if you have MTHFR, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is expressing either. And even if it is expressing, there are things that you can do about it. So just to unpack that a little bit further, MTHFR stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. Okay.
Quite a mouthful.
Yeah, quite a mouthful. But it's really, really important for cellular health. So it's important for the creation of toxins, creation of proteins, for repair, for detoxification of toxins. It helps to metabolize our hormones. It helps with mood, so it turns on and off certain neurotransmitters. What else does it do? Energy production. It's really vital. And we do know that it has been implicated in some people with recurrent pregnancy loss and with an increased risk of miscarriage. That's out there, we know that. What we also know, which is really interesting, if we think back to, for example, the male factor conversation we were having earlier, we know that one of the things it's really important for is that it's hard for our body to make something called glutathione, which is our master antioxidant, if we have that MTHFR variation. So we know how important antioxidants are to prevent DNA damage and to support against DNA damage. So going back to that idea that if you've got the variation, it doesn't necessarily mean it is expressed, because if you're living, for example, a stress-free life, if you're eating foods that are really rich in folate, so the food form of folate, which is much easier for our body to absorb, so we're talking green leafy vegetables, avocados, almonds, bananas, if you're eating those, you might be okay.
Yeah.
And if you're not eating them, start eating them, you know, and really, really look at those stress levels, because that can really help. And then another thing you can do is you can look at the supplements that you're taking. And for a lot of women, they will do better on a methylated form of folic acid, which is called methyl tetrahydrofolate, or, you know, food grown folate.
Yeah.
Now, again, the caveat there, going back to the supplement point that we were making earlier, there are still some women who actually find that they don't do so well on that. They don't have that variation, and actually they can feel a little bit jittery if they have really methylated vitamins. So again, it's cutting our cloth according to the individual.
Having further testing done, if you find out you have this, to find out what would be best for you.
Yeah. Or you can either, I mean, yes, absolutely. Because, and if you know, and if you've been told that you have that variation, you want to do something about it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you've been told you have it, then yes, you begin to adopt that course. But again, it's also going slowly with some of these supplements and being wary of them. They're powerful things. You know, we use them because they work and because they do stuff. So just taking them blindly and then feeling pretty awful, you know, it's not great. It's a bit like, for example, if you're told you've got an underactive thyroid and you're given, you know, to begin with, you might be given some levothyroxine by the doctor, for example, and they have to titrate their dose. They've got to get the right dose for you.
Yeah.
And otherwise you might be feeling all jittery. It just might not work for you. So it's cutting our cloth.
Yeah. Is it worth the male partner having tests done to see if they have the MTHFR gene?
Yes, you can absolutely, because MTHFR actually affects lots of things. I mean,
like,
to be honest,
DNA damage and things, surely that is.
Yes, absolutely. And cardiovascular risk is increased. Cancer risks are increased, unfortunately, if you have that variation. But again, there's stuff you can do about it. I don't actually perform that genetic testing on very many people. I will do sometimes, and you can do it, and it's a relatively inexpensive test, actually.
I think some clinics recommend it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of clinics do recommend it. And yeah, I think the more information we have, if we're armed with that information, then it can only be a good thing.
Especially as it sounds like it's quite a common thing to have. You said up to 60% of the population may have this.
Yeah, that's what some studies are saying. Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Yeah.
Whilst we're talking about genes, there's another question. What can you tell us about the C4M2 gene and how?
Okay, all right. So again, that's another genetic variation, and it can come also either from the mother or the father. And it's partly responsible for blood clotting. So that's why it's really important when we're talking about fertility. So an abnormality can lead to a sort of stickier blood, a higher propensity to clot. And then if you're thinking about from a fertility perspective, that can interfere with implantation. It can interfere with blood flow to an embryo. It can cause blood clotting disorders further down the line, preeclampsia, and also low birth weight. So, you know, it's not something that you want. And again, it's something that can be supported. And generally, this is something that will be tested in clinics. So I wouldn't be testing that. And if it is tested in clinics, they tend to prescribe a blood thinning drug even called Clexane. Now, what we can do, and very often part of my protocol, so earlier, sort of hopefully further down the line, is we will be looking at things to ensure that your blood is working as well as it can be. And one of the things that I use a lot is omega-3 oils, which I mentioned earlier, and they have anti-inflammatory benefits, and they can help to thin your blood. So for example, if you're taking an omega-3 oil or capsules, you want to be very careful, and you should not be taking that if you are put on a blood thinning medication, because again, they'll interact badly. Aspirin's another example of that. It has those blood thinning properties. But what we can do, again, further back before you get to that stage, is we can make sure that you have got enough omega-3 oils in your diet, or you're taking them supplementally. So we're talking about oily fish. And again, the larger sorts of, the smaller oily fish, we're looking at salmon, mackerel, anchovies, herring, and sardines are the ones that we're really, really looking at. Ideally wild salmon, if possible. And ideally organic if you can as well. But they're all really rich in omega-3 oils. Walnuts are really rich in omega-3 oils. Interestingly, green leafy vegetables are really helpful from that point of view as well. So we bring some of those things into the diet quite naturally anyway. And that again is quite naturally going to be supporting you as you go on that journey.
So I guess it's good to find out about these things as early as possible so that you have time to work.
I think it really is. It really is. The sooner you know about this stuff, the sooner you can start to do something about it. Now, again, I should add that if you get to a clinic and you're having fertility investigations and they do discover that gene, they will probably put you on blood thinning medications. And then that's when we switch our protocol as well, because it's always going to be evolving depending on what's happening to you at any given time. And so we would modulate that accordingly just to make sure that everything's really, really safe. So drug nutrient interactions are really, it's vital to consider these. So again, if you're taking any sort of prescription drugs, you shouldn't really be going out and just buying supplements off the shelf, ideally.
Of course, So I guess when you work with clients, you will work with them alongside the treatment that's recommended from their clinics.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and that's an important point. And I think it would be, people need to realize that in an ideal world, we are working alongside. Nutritional therapy is not an alternative therapy, it's complementary. And ideally, we work alongside your GP or your consultant. If there are tests that need to be done and they can be done on the NHS, I would rather you do them by your GP. That way they know what's going on. As well, and also, of course, you wouldn't need to pay for them because they're not going to be a private test. So everything we can get done so that your GP is armed with the same information that I'm armed with, and vice versa. All it's going to do is help you get the best quality of care for you as the individual, and that is important. So I will frequently write to GPs and to consultants, and I will, happily have conversations with them on the phone about particular cases if necessary. And there are some GPs and consultants who I do work with, and urologists, or I may refer on to, just so that we're all working, with your best interests at heart.
And I think that's the best sort of approach to this, isn't it? Is the more people that can help you and support you and all work together to support you, is going to have a better rate of success.
As long as they're working together. And I think that's the thing, because what you don't want is to feel that in one corner you're being told something and in another corner you're being told something else, and then that just adds to the confusion, which is the last thing that any of us want.
Yes, of course. So one other question. Thyroid and recurrent loss. This is a bit of a passion project of mine. Too many pregnancies are lost to undiagnosed thyroid conditions. And I see it time and time again. But if we rewind a little bit, the thyroid, what it is, first of all, it is a gland. So a gland produces hormones and it sits just at the front of your throat here. And it is responsible for our overall metabolism. So it's so vital that every single cell in the body has thyroid receptors on it. And it helps to power and drive those cells to do what they need to do, and what the individual cells need to do. So it's responsible for, for example, it wants to bring the body into balance. So if you're cold, it'll take steps to heat you up. If you're stressed, it'll get you to slow the hell down. If there's a virus, it will help to galvanize that immune system. So it works to try and keep things where they're supposed to be. And then when we're talking about fertility, for example, thyroid hormone binds to the egg, if you like, and helps it to grow. And it's also really, really important for babies' brain development as well. So it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. What can happen is, we get symptoms sometimes. And bearing in mind that you have thyroid receptors absolutely everywhere, you get quite a diverse range of symptoms. So they're not always going to be a thyroid disorder, but the sort of things that you'd be looking out for as being really tired all the time, a sluggish digestion, so maybe bloating or constipation, menstrual irregularities are a big one, and PMS, feeling cold with your extremities, hands and feet can get cold, and that can be a real hallmark sign, low mood, inability to lose weight, all sorts of things. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, brain fog. Did you once mention something about the outer eyebrow?
Yes, so the outer, so hair can thin with thyroid, and also the outer third of your eyebrow can get very thin and you can lose it. And again, that's another sign that there may be a thyroid issue. Now, of course, as I said before, that's quite a broad constellation of symptoms. So if you have them, it's definitely worth checking it out.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be something else, but it's worth checking it out. And when it comes to fertility, again, if you've got a low functioning thyroid, it can prevent ovulation. It can shorten your luteal phase. So, that means you're not going to be getting enough progesterone further down the line to support a pregnancy. It can increase your risk of miscarriage, particularly in that first trimester. It can be implicated in preeclampsia and preterm birth.
Yeah.
So it's not a good thing.
So
many things. And in fact, there was a recent study that was published this summer, which suggested that 1 in 5 women who experience either more than one miscarriage or subfertility have a thyroid disorder of some description, which may be undiagnosed. 1 in 5.
I personally have just discovered that I have thyroid issues. So I think you've probably seen my posts on Instagram and stuff. I've had 7 losses so far. And I kept saying to my clinics, is there anything else we can test for, anything else we can check? But no, you've had all the tests. And only recently, along working with a nutritionist and also a recurrent miscarriage clinician, they've discovered that actually I have really raised thyroid antibodies. So whereas I don't have an underactive or overactive thyroid, my immune system is attacking my thyroid. And it just is crazy that I've gone through all of that and only now has this been picked up. Yeah. I also, when I did have a successful pregnancy, I developed preeclampsia at 32 weeks. So a lot of these things now, when I hear them, I think, I had that. And it's never, ever been picked up. So it's definitely worth people looking into it.
It really is. And I think one of the things, as yours is a perfect case in point. What tends to happen, a GP will test thyroid stimulating hormone, which is TSH, and they will generally test T4, which is thyroxine, one of your thyroid hormones. But those 2 alone are not enough to give us the whole picture. Yeah. So, for example, if thyroid antibodies, as in your case, are identified, we know that there is an autoimmune component to that thyroid disorder. And we support that in a very different way to those cases where we don't have that. If, for example, there's a marker called reverse T3, and if that's really elevated, we know that stress is probably playing quite a large role. There may be an issue between the conversion between T4, thyroxine, into our active thyroid hormone, which is the sort of thyroid hormone that our cells actually use. So it has to go through this conversion process. And if, for example, the T3 is very low and the T4 is quite high, we know there's an issue there, and that's probably down to nutrient deficiencies. So again, the more color we can get from testing, and in fact, what I do now is I test every single client. Every single woman I will test for thyroid, or I will check that they've had recent tests, because I'm seeing it time and time again.
It almost become part of your initial testing.
I think it should
have it done, and then and if you do have it, it's fine. You can work with it, and you can do to improve.
And again, that's the point. There really are things that you can do. And I think the key thing to remember with the thyroid is it's metabolically active. It's going to be constantly reacting to stimuli. So, for example, your levels in the morning are going to be different from your levels in the evening. So when you are testing, you want to try and test roughly at the same time each day. And ideally, you want to be testing in the morning before you've had breakfast. So after a sort of fast period, that's when they say that your TSH levels are going to be at their highest. So that's going to give you a clearer idea. But certainly testing at the same time each day. So rather than taking one test in isolation, if, for example, the GP's done a test, I will generally repeat that test, but with a sort of more comprehensive panel. And then again, we're seeing what's going on. So it's a level playing field.
Yeah. So through your GP, you wouldn't have that comprehensive test. It would be the more standard test.
It would be the more standard test. If TSH is significantly elevated, and this is another grey area, because for normal functioning health, the received wisdom is that you want a TSH of 4 is sort of the upper limit.
Yeah.
For fertility, though, we now know that we really want our TSH to be no more than between 2 and 2.5, or ideally lower. So, you know, there's that real discrepancy there. And unfortunately, that is not necessarily always filtering through, certainly to GPs. Most fertility clinics are a little bit more on it now, which is great. But it does mean that if you're going for those initial workups with your GP, if you're not at an IVF stage, you know, there's still a whole heap of other stuff going on potentially.
And also people may not need to get to the stage of IVF.
Precisely.
If it may be something that is going on with the thyroid, that may be enough to make the difference.
Absolutely.
And things you can do, you can help them work on naturally to improve thyroid condition.
There's lots and lots you can do, again, depending on when, you know, once we know what's driving it, then we can deal with it. So what I should add is that if the TSH level is really elevated, that will be a time when you may get your antibodies checked. But in a case like yours, you know,
my levels were fine.
You're at a subclinical level, so it hadn't begun to filter through yet. It can take years for it to filter through. And the other thing to bear in mind is that period of pregnancy, the demands placed upon our thyroid gland are far greater than at any other time in our life. We need about 30% more thyroid hormone to support both mother and baby. So that can be a time that, you know, things can go out of whack. And similarly, postpartum, you know, very many women who are experiencing postnatal depression, if you check their thyroid levels, you'll find that, again, they have, you know, your thyroid's been sort of going like that a little bit, trying to keep up with, you know, this crazy journey that it's been on.
That's interesting. So for someone who's perhaps trying to conceive a second child, he finds that they have thyroid issues.
And again, something, I think you're absolutely right there. And the other thing to bear in mind with conceiving second time or third time round, and this also is just as relevant if you have suffered a loss, be it one or recurrent losses, your body is going to be depleted. You know, we go through so much, even, you know, regardless of where we are on that journey. Once we have a loss, we are going to be depleted in certain vitamins and nutrients. And so we really do need to have time to build ourselves back up again. So we need to take that into consideration. That's part of the bigger picture as well.
It's so important, isn't it? Just to have that time to build your strength up again.
It really is. Absolutely. And also time to recover a little bit emotionally. You need to process all of this stuff. And I think, you know, there are some amazing counsellors out there, you know, as you know, and you've got a lovely roster of them. But getting help, having an opportunity to process is really important. So you're addressing both the emotional and the physical needs. And very often people find they go, you know, quite a few steps down that line when they're actually taking some action themselves, because it is really empowering when you are beginning to educate yourself and you understand your body a little bit more.
And sometimes you just want to feel like you're actually being proactive and you're doing something that's going to help. And you think, you know, even if this isn't the time when it works, I'll know I've done everything possible to try to support it.
I think that's so important because there are such big decisions that we need to make. Such big decisions, they're life-changing, and you do want to feel that you've given yourself the best possible chance. You know, you've got a real opportunity here to change things. There are no guarantees, there are no magic wands, but there is an opportunity to make things better.
I think it's quite important for people who have perhaps experienced a loss or multiple losses to feel that there are things that they can still try to do, that it doesn't mean the end of the road for them. You can still find support, and there are still stuff.
That hope is very real, and you know, that seed of hope, I think it's really important. And also I think when you start to do these things, it brings about a more positive mindset, and that in itself can be really helpful, both for the couple as a couple and the dynamics of their couple, and you know, for our own well-being generally. We need to know, as you say, that we're doing everything we can, but also that takes a huge pressure off us as well.
And I think, like I said before, just having the support of someone like yourself to help you through it is going to make a big difference, just to help motivate people and to kind of be there for them. It's really important.
And it is often the really little things that make the difference. So
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be, people sometimes are scared of coming to a nutritional therapist. They're going to be told that they've got to cut out gluten and they've got to cut out dairy and they've got to cut out this and they've got to cut out all their favorite foods. Unless there is a good reason, and in some cases there are very good reasons to eliminate particular food types, but no food really, you don't want any food to be on the banned list, as it were. We want to be eating in a balanced way, because otherwise you get into that whole yo-yo dieting situation, and that's not going to help you either, because that it's going to drive you to drink, quite
and
frankly.
also like you said, the stress of not being able to have some things, or to feel guilty if you've had something you shouldn't have had, it's actually not worth it.
It's not worth it. No. I mean, alcohol's a perfect example of that. We know the evidence suggests that we should not be drinking, certainly not vast quantities when we're trying to conceive, nor through pregnancy.
Yeah.
Having one glass, if you're having a really nice meal with your partner and you're reconnecting, one small, glass of really good quality, and go for the best quality wine you can.
Yeah.
Every so often, and I'm not talking about, every other day or whatever, but, every so often, have it.
And it's
please.
important to be able to relax and to still find some pleasure in things, because this is a difficult time for people. So any moments of pleasure and happiness you can find, if that's a glass of wine or a square of chocolate, then it's probably
definitely. I'm often saying to clients, actually, think of what you were like before you started this. What were the things that you loved doing together? Now, I appreciate at the moment we're slightly hampered by this blimmin' pandemic, but, think about what those things were and try and reconnect with some of those if you can. If it's watching a really great film, or, whatever it might be,
small things.
It could be the smallest thing. It could be just sort of, snuggling up on the sofa together and, reading the papers. That, it could be anything. But we've got to be doing all of these little things as well, because that mind-body connection is so important.
And especially at the moment, because of the pandemic, that's added a lot of extra stress for people. So it's even more important to look after our mental health and make sure we're doing these things that are going to make us feel better.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Alison.
You're very, very welcome.
Really helpful, and it's been great to hear how you can help people. And hopefully, if anyone out there has other questions for Alison, please do get in touch.
Please do, yeah.
You can find details about Alison in the expert section, or you could send us a message and we can put you in touch.
Yeah, I'd love that. Okay, thank you very, very much. It's lovely to chat.